Hi, this is Tracy Taylor. We are with Heidi Franco today, and we're doing a candidate forum for the Heber City Council race. So Heidi, thanks for coming and doing this. Hopefully this will help the voters decide. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you've been on the council for 4 years, so tell us why you decided to run again.
Okay, well, for one thing, I love serving the people of Heber City. I mean, that is exactly why I'm running. I'm not doing this for a position or for perks or for my family or my friends. I really want to give back to the community, which is why I did it 4 years ago. It's not easy to run for office. It's not easy to put yourself out there. You know, I think all of us would rather stay home and just enjoy what we have here in the valley. But I also know that we're not going to keep what we have here in the valley unless we work hard to keep what we love here. So that's why I'm running again.
Great. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do for your job, and then what qualities you think you bring to the council that benefit Heber City residents.
I do like to learn, and I love to teach. So I guess I'm a talker because that is my full-time job. I'm a full-time professor at an online university called Western Governors University. And yes, I teach government all day long. In fact, today I was just telling a student about this responsible model for political parties and candidates and voters. And it's not just political parties that need to be responsible on what they say and promise to the voters, but candidates need to also. Candidates can't just say, well, you know, I'm a good person, vote for me. No, candidates need to make those promises to voters. And I have in my campaign, just like I did 4 years ago. I'm trying as hard as I can to make the Heber City accountable to the people. More reporting, better technology, and again, working as hard as we can, as hard as I can, to preserve what we love here, our clean air, our quality of life, our safety, our peace, keeping that airport where it is, the size it is, and keeping it self-sustainable, because that has not been a goal of the city before, and it's taken a lot of work to even get it to this point where we're trying to plan into the future how to keep it self-sustaining at the same level. So anyway, I'm also a mother. I have 12 kids. Yes, that's right, 6 and 6, and they're great. I love being with them, but I'm also serving because of them, because I want them to know that there's a place here that they can live and be happy and feel safe. And the wonderful thing, I've so enjoyed going out and handing out the brochures, talking to people, and I think so many people in Heber have a little slice of heaven, and we love it, right? We love our peace, our quiet, our beauty. Oh, we love that, and yet you just can't take it for granted. It takes work to preserve and to, make sure the police are doing their job and public works are doing their job and the roads are taken care of and there's safety for these kids.
Well, let's talk about some of those.
There you go.
Because we've got a list here of issues that we're dealing with Heber City right now. So let's talk about annexation.
Oh, that's a biggie.
It's you've been looking at the annexation map the last few months. You're a little different. You are an incumbent as far as the other candidates that are running. So let me ask you, as an incumbent, what are your thoughts about annexations? Do you think it's a good idea? Or what are your thoughts of where this is going to go?
There's a lot of pros and cons to this, Tracy. And the thing is that I have said, even before I was elected 4 years ago, that any annexation should come in at the same density that the county had given it, because all we've seen now for 2 decades in our county is that every time annexation comes in, it's given triple, quadruple the density, right? Which means our downtown needs revitalization, and yet our outskirts are where the high density is. And then that high density only puts more pressure on more annexations with high density again. And it's this domino effect where our downtown needs help, our downtown needs a plan, our downtown needs, some TLC as well as support, and yet we're becoming a donut, right? Empty in the middle, so to speak, to some degree. and the high density and that increasing pressure to expand. And so I'm saying, look, people do have private property rights. They can petition for annexation, but they need to come in at the same density or as close to the same density as they have, because again, North Village, that's on the annexation map. That's already given very high density. Why in the world would anybody want more density in the North Village, right? When you look at the fields this way on the west side of Heber, thank you. You know, all those beautiful fields. Why did we want high subdivisions, high density subdivisions in those fields? You know, that was one of the promises of the form-based code that we didn't get last year. That the form-based code was supposed to have higher density in the middle and blend out to the rural county areas. We didn't get that at all. Everything was increased in density in the form-based code proposal. Oh my goodness, that was not a good thing, and I did not vote for that.
Well, and the annexations, getting back to that, will be happening. You'll have to make some hard decisions this year on that.
Exactly, and we have sat down with the county in an interlocal meeting, and we're planning to do it again, because we made a verbal agreement with the county that we were going to work on a plan, especially for the northern part, you know, north of the city, to keep the same densities, to keep the same development agreements, to you know, take all of this incredible planning that the county's done and keep it so that it's not getting denser up there.
Okay.
Right? Okay, but I'm saying, you know, it depends on what area of the town. You know, people that are east of Mill Road, they don't want to be annexed in. But yet, the other members of the city council just annexed in that corner of Mill Road and Center Street. There were some extenuating circumstances there for just right there at the corner, you know, on the east side of Mill Road. But that was all. And we had turned down actually an annexation that included more properties previous to that. So less properties came in right at the corner. Again, every annexation has its pros and cons, but see, now let me give you the why I think so many annexations have happened in the past. It's because the Heber City budget is based on growth, and the Heber City budget with its building permits and so forth are the profit, so to speak, in the budget that sustains other parts of the budget, instead of each part of the budget being self-sustainable, you know, in a user fee type mentality. We can't do user fees for the police department. All right, that's
Public Works building.
Well, the Public Works building, that's a whole nother issue. We could talk about that if you'd like.
Well, but that's something that will be built with some impact fees because of the growth, and the impact fees will finance part of that building.
Right, that's the water, sewer, and the street utility fees, as well as the road fees to some degree. But that's what's going to build that Public Works building. I'm the one that said, look, because interest rates are so low, why don't we just borrow the same amount of money and fix all of our decaying infrastructure so we don't have to expand Public Works to the same degree? You see the trade-offs, right? Do you put it into the building and the equipment, or do you actually fix upfront the infrastructure when interest rates are low?
Well, and here's the thing. Okay. I mean, you know, we're giving the voters a lot to think about. Yes. There is a lot going on in the city. There's a lot. So this is something you will be dealing with in the next year. So let's talk about something else. The airport, which is another subject that is very difficult to put into a couple sentences.
Lots of issues.
But what are your thoughts about working with the FAA in the future and maybe having to expand it, or trying to keep it at the size it is now?
Okay, nobody wants to expand it in the whole valley except those that, of course, are benefited by the expansion. And I think I figured out who that is now. But the point is that the city has never cared about that airport being self-sustaining. The city has used general funds and put them into the airport. Now, granted, there are some property taxes from the airport that go into our general fund, but that's tens of thousands of dollars, right, a year compared to the hundreds of thousands that go to the county or the school district in just the property taxes. So what has the city done under my few years?
And we must say, too, you are sitting on the airport board,
I'm sitting
too.
on the airport board
you do know
for 3 years now, right. And it took me some time to figure out the acronyms and what the FAA wanted versus, of course, what we, the taxpayers, have wanted, and to figure out that our general fund has subsidized that airport over $1 million easily in the past 30, maybe 40 years. You know, we can only account for it so far as what we've been able to dig out. Okay, that makes me really sad, because the property taxes going into the general fund are nowhere close to what the rest of us have subsidized that airport back out of the general fund. All right, so my goal was, number one, to make it self-sustaining. And I've worked with Ron Crittenden. We've been able to get other airport board members onto the board that have those kinds of goals to make it self-sustaining. We've raised the landing fees. We've raised the hangar fees. The hangar leasee owners themselves came to us and said, look, we're willing to pay more. You know, we know that the FAA is forcing you to expand. So now let's go to the FAA. Anyway, we've tried to do several things to make it self-sustaining. We have a 20-year budget now without FAA funds, because the FAA has threatened us 2 or 3 times now and said, look, if you won't expand or go through the master plan process, we will take away the discretionary money and you will only get the entitlement money. But we didn't get any entitlement money last year because of this whole back and forth kind of threatening stance of theirs. Okay, we have hired a nationally ranked lawyer to represent us to the FAA and the complaints that have been made against the city from hangar leasees out at the airport, because they've complained of the city discriminating because the city wants to make it self-sustaining. We're not trying to discriminate against anyone. We know the only way that airport can stay self-sustaining with or without FAA money is if we have more economic development at the airport. And so we're in the process now, under the guidance of our nationally ranked lawyer, who has won against the FAA, by the way. That's nice, right? We're rewriting the minimum standards to allow more economic competition and development at the airport. That's a big deal. Because of the growth right in our nation, especially here in Utah, being right at the top of economic growth in the nation, there's pressure now at the airport, right, for more economic development. More hangars are being built. We've bid those out under Ron Crittenden's suggestion of using a bid process to get as much money as possible for new hangars to come in. We're looking forward to putting out an RFP for another FBO. We think that the airport traffic can handle it for the GA, the general aviation planes, not jets, the GA, right? And that's being debated right now on the minimum standards. I would invite anybody in the city to come to the airport advisory board meetings this month, next month, because that's where the big issues are going to be talked about, and see, okay, how do we make our airport self-sustaining at the current size? Because we've been able to get resolutions from the county, from Midway, I think from Daniel, I think even from Charleston, saying no, don't expand. Nobody wants to expand. But because nobody was working on it this way, we were right on the brink of being forced to expand. And if it hadn't been for Kelly Potter, Ron Crittenden, and myself pulling back as hard as we could for the last few years, our city would have already been signed, sealed, and delivered with expansion, because that's what the FAA wanted.
Well, and the voters will hopefully be keeping track of what's going on here in the next year on that. Let's move to the bypass road, which is another issue that we're going to have to face. You've already talked about revitalization of Main Street, mentioned that already, but you know, there's two schools of whether that's a good idea if it takes you know, business away from the merchants on Main Street, or if that's the only way to get the traffic off of Main Street to try to make our Main Street more user friendly to the customers. So what are your thoughts? Which way are you leaning on the bypass road? And
well, I'm in favor of it. I think we do need to build it. I think that the growth has happened enough within our city that our downtown merchants can easily be sustainable with the growth that we've had in the valley, or even just within our city. Of course, they'd like more, right? And
Right.
and I can't blame them on that either. But that's part of the downtown revitalization program that we voted for last year under my motion after the form-based code failed. Now, the planning, it has to come from the planning commission. But anyway, that's another topic,
Yeah.
okay? So on the bypass road, I think the city and the county have really watched it carefully. We have really been stinkers. At least I have been really stinker with the developers out there on the bypass road area, out by, past the county fairgrounds and the convention center. We had a developer come in there, and UDOT changed the width requirements.
So I know now they're going to be looking
So we had to
at
get more.
that again. It's going to be back on there. But you're for moving it off of Main
moving
Street.
it off. I think that
Okay.
the growth is more than going to compensate for any loss of business from the diesels. It's just that the diesels create such a safety hazard
Right.
on our main street, and no one feels safe even walking on the side of the street with them rumbling by and going faster than they should.
Okay.
And we've been able to get the crosswalks put in with UDOT. That took some pressure. It took some time to work with them.
Right.
I would like more. I think we need certainly another crosswalk between the McDonald's, down to the hub. We need something along there because people try to cross there. It's dangerous. And,
Great.
I'd rather
You've
take
been
back
working
our
on
main
it.
street. Yeah, let's take back our main street, and let's work with the state legislature as hard as we can to push for that funding. Senator Van Tassel's the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee.
Right.
I told you I like to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I'm going on.
No,
and
that's
on.
fine. That's
Okay.
fine. Let's talk about really quickly infrastructure. I know you've been repairing sewer and water lines.
Right.
We've had water fees raised and sewer fees raised to try to cover some of this. Is it going as planned? Because you guys have been working on this for the last
Let me tell
couple years to try to really start.
It's true, but I think the issue is lack of information and lack of accountability, which is why I'm running on I'm accountable to you, because I've been asking for years, seriously, to get reports from Public Works about what is their workload, how much are they doing every day, where are the trouble spots around town. We hear about it generally through the city manager, but not specifically. We do get reports from many other offices within our city, but not from Public Works. Okay, I brought it up again this year, and finally I've received 2 reports, right? 2 reports of the monthly workload of Public Works. If I'd been able to do that for several years, then I could have tracked, right? Where's the trouble spots in the city? How many man hours is it taking? Where should we really prioritize the budget or the efforts? See, we don't even know that information.
Okay,
And
so that's something we're going to be really
Right.
needing to get to the bottom of in the next
Right.
year.
Now, see, all of those water increases and sewer increases were based on general knowledge from our city manager that, we have to replace aging infrastructure. And that certainly made sense because of the repairs we could see. But then I found out as we went through the Public Works building process that now a lot of those rate increases were instead going to pay for the building instead of the new building, instead of the aging infrastructure. And I can't even break it down because I don't have the information to be able to study this out and say, hey, is this wise or not?
Okay.
Okay, so I'm
So
saying we need reporting.
This is not going as you had hoped. Let's
No.
just put it that way.
And that's
something that you need to work on if you get back in.
That's why I voted against this year's water increase, or I should say sewer increase too, because until I have the information and know what's I feel like is best for the city, I'm not going to just vote to raise those rates when it's actually going maybe to the new building instead of to the aging infrastructure.
Now, I'm going to ask you to do something, and I don't know if it's going to be possible.
Okay.
Heber Light and Power.
Oh boy.
Where do we even begin to talk about Heber Light and Power in the last 4 years? But can you give us a minute of just what you have seen in the last 4 years in Heber Light and Power? I know you and Clean were both on the board when you first got on the city council. Without taking way too much time, try to give us a sense of where you think Heber Light and Power is at this point.
Okay, Heber Light and Power is following national trends. that because of the solar industry, the load, right, the need for electricity is actually declining. Now, when we were put on the board 4 years ago, 4 years ago, these times fly. Anyway, when we were put on the board, we were looking at projections of continued growth. Now, we still have that to some degree in our county because of growth, right? But we also have this enormous impact of solar energy, which is either leveling that growth so it's not projected as high, right? It's either leveling out that growth, or it's stabilizing, or it's even declining. And so Heber Light and Power has done some policies that you can only do solar energy up to 90% of your load, so that remaining 10% is going to come through them. Right now, that's helping them adjust their high projections for growth. Okay, but the point is, they're separate from the city. They're separate from all the cities. They are their own organization, and they are accountable to themselves, even though it's our mayors, right? The Midway
and
mayor,
Heber City
the
owns
Charleston
75% of
Right.
Heber Light and Power.
Right, and we get the 2 council members and the mayor to be on that board and run it. I think everybody in this valley ought to be concerned about how self-sustainable Heber Light and Power is. Did I say that right? Heber Light and Power? Yes. Sorry, I'm running too fast here. But how sustainable is it, and how accountable is it to the people, right? We know that they raised rates the year after, I think it was the year after I left or was relieved of the duties under Mayor McDonald. And the reason is that Heber Light and Power right now is a really high debt load. On one of their bonds of the 3, they're only paying interest on it, not even the principal. And that interest is high compared to today's interest rates. So all of us ratepayers, we're paying super high interest, high debt load on yesterday's technology, not the future technology, right? Not renewable energy or geothermal energy or even solar energy, even though that's a part of their overall portfolio. We're paying high debt on the natural gas or the turbine and generators, yesterday's technology. And they also have high debt in their retirement liabilities. We have the highest salaries in the state of Utah for a municipal power bureaucracy. Remember, they're a government bureaucracy. Right. They have the highest salaries in the state of Utah. They have the highest benefits also than any of the other government workers in this area, or maybe, you know, we didn't compare all the counties, but still, right. That high administrative cost is just not sustainable unless they raise rates and continue to raise rates. Again, healthcare costs alone means that it's not sustainable. Healthcare costs for the employees, and then that really high debt load. I keep asking them, when are you going to restructure your debt? You have to do that in lower interest rates in today's market, right? Haven't done that yet, but they have high retirement liabilities that are increasing $500,000 a year. They're not funding those. Okay, now if you can't fund it during the good times, how are you going to fund it during the bad times, right? Everybody knows Social Security is not funded, right? We know that. Okay, well, we're doing it in a microcosm way here in Heber Light and Power. That's not sustainable.
Well, you obviously know a lot about the city and
studied hard.
Yeah, definitely. Talk to the voters and tell them why you would like them to vote for you, and give them any information, a website, phone number, whatever, to contact you.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you for listening, everybody. It was probably an earful, more than you wanted to hear. But like I say, I dive deep into the issues. I've studied them all of my life. I teach them. I'm trying to help my students become better citizens and be able to improve government wherever they live, right? And I've taught thousands of students across the country, and that's been a real joy. And now I get to try to use all of the knowledge I've gained as far as good government, legal standards, the Constitution, the state code, what our own code says here in the city, and really try to improve things here to make them as efficient as possible, as accountable as possible to the citizens. I think in the past that it's been hard for citizens to really know what's going on right here in our local level. And you know, there's big issues out there, but it's hard to get reliable information or see progress on those issues. And I want to be accountable to the people. I want to give them information. I want to hear what their opinions are, what they have to say, because when it comes to growth, there's 13,000 people in this city with 13,000 opinions, and until we keep talking about it enough to find consensus and find majority rule on how to deal with our growth, that's what I feel like my job is, to keep talking about it, to keep educating people and say, okay, there's these options or this option or this thing, what's going to work best for us right here. So that's why I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking to help continue good government, accountable government here at the local level. Make sure that our tax money is used wisely and efficiently and as productively as possible. If you're interested in that, then I'd appreciate it.
And you have a website?
Or I'm doing it on Facebook.
Okay, great.
This year.
And
you can look me up on Facebook and see about more issues that I've talked about and cared about there.
Is there an email or a phone number you'd like to give out?
Right. You can email me through the city website. Probably that's the easiest, but then I'll respond separately because the campaigning can't be done right through the city website. But email me through the city council website and I'll respond separately to you. And get out and vote. We had a 50% voter turnout rate with the mail-in ballot ordinance that we passed. That was exciting. I'd love to see a higher voter turnout rate this year.
Well, thanks for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening.